Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. My name's Cass and I am here to talk about some books. I'm gonna apologize if you can hear the fan that I have blowing on me. It has been 90 degrees outside all week and it's probably about 80 in my apartment, even with the air conditioning on. So we're struggling a little bit. My power also went out for a solid 24 hours at the beginning of the week, so that was really fun. But yeah, apologies for any background noise. Today I wanted to talk about a little project that I guess I'm taking on for the rest of 2024. This year specifically, I've really realized how valuable rereading can be and just how much your experience with a book can change depending on like where you are in life and how other books that you've read can impact your perception of what you're reading. So I really wanted to lean into that because I think that like realization has really helped me be more intentional with the books that I'm reading and just kind of think a little bit more critically about them and really unpack why I like the things that I like. This year alone, I've reread as many books as I have in the past 3 years that I've been reading combined. So it's been a really interesting new aspect to kind of add into my reading routine. And just for some context, this year I read Parade by Rachel Cusk twice. I read My Death by Lisa Tuttle twice, and then I reread Checkout 19, which I had read back in, I think, October of 2022, and I wanted to revisit it because I didn't love it the first time around, and I wanted to see if I got anything different out of it, if my opinion on it changed. My opinion on it did actually pretty much stay the same, but I do think that I got some different ideas from it this time around. But prior to this year and rereading those 3 books, I had reread 3 books since I got back into reading in 2021. And they were all books that I had read initially in 2021 whenever I first got back into reading as like an adult. And those books were The Idiot by Elif Batuman, My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh, which I've actually read 3 times. I read it back, I want to say in like 2019, 2020-ish, whenever I had first purchased it. I had heard about it through a like author event that my community college was promoting with Ottessa Moshfegh, and I bought it based on the cover. I ended up not going to the event, which I regret so much now. And then I read it while I was in college, but it literally I think took me like a year to finish it. I reread it in 2021, and then I reread it again in I think 2022, I think. So that is like the book that I have read the most, I think. And then I also reread Outline by Rachel Cusk, I think in 2022. So those were kind of like 3 books that had really formed my taste in books back in 2021. And I, for the most part, enjoyed them upon rereading. So I've decided that I would like to reread 1 book every month in the rest of 2024. And I'm hoping to do like a little vlog about each of those books. So that would be 6 books to reread, 6 little like mini vlogs to kind of talk about my experiences rereading them. And yeah, I just want to kind of work the rereading thing into my routine a bit more and revisit some old favorites as well as some books that I didn't 100% get along with the first time around. So I have those books here. I'm going to talk about them real quick. I'm going to try and keep it short because it is really warm in here, and we'll talk more about them in future videos. So we're going to start with the books that I loved in the past that I would like to reread. I chose one from 2021, one from 2022, and one from 2023. And I'm curious to see if I still feel the same about these books. So the first one that I would like to reread this year is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. I initially read this in December of 2021, and I remember that reading experience so vividly. I think that I had read like the first 20 pages on like a lunch break at work, and then the next day I read like another 20 pages on my break, and then I went home that night and I sat on the couch from like 4:30 when I got home until like 9 or 10 p.m. and I read the whole entire thing in pretty much one sitting. This is Michelle Zauner's memoir. If you don't know who she is a musical artist, singer. She goes by Japanese Breakfast, and this is her memoir about the loss of her mother, who passed away after a battle with cancer, and it explores their kind of fraught relationship throughout the years, and then how Zauner was dealing with that grief. Oh, I cried at this book. I remember like sitting on the couch and my mom was sitting like on the love seat in the living room, and it made me really emotional, just kind of thinking about like mother-daughter relationships and things like that. One of the other things that I had really loved about this was the food writing in it. She talks a lot about Korean dishes, and the writing, I remember it was really like descriptive and made me really hungry. And yeah, she just talks a lot about that because food and cooking was one of the things that kind of brought her and her mom together. So I absolutely loved this. It was my favorite book of 2021, and yeah, I'm excited to come back to it. The next book that I loved that I'd like to reread is Sula by Toni Morrison. I know Lit with Cat recently reread this as well, and I initially read this because of Jalen from the Bar in the Bookcase. He had talked about how much he loved it in a video, and I picked it up and it was immediately 5 stars for me. I read it for the first time in October of 2022, and this was my first Toni Morrison that I ever read. And if you don't know, Sula is the story of 2 friends, Nell and Sula, and it explores their friendship from like their childhood, and then they kind of fall out of touch, and then Sula comes back and it explores their adult lives. I remember being really gripped by this. There are some really intense scenes in here that are still like etched into my memory, and I think that Toni Morrison is really just like a writer that you have to reread. I'm sure that there is so much that I missed in this book the first time around in 2022, and I'm really excited to dive back into this. I've also read Song of Solomon and Beloved by Toni Morrison, but that is it from her so far. So I'm excited to go back to this because this was a top favorite book of 2022 for me. And then I would also like to reread Too Much and Not the Mood by Durga chew-bose. This is an essay collection, and I initially read it in May of 2023. It topped the list of my favorite nonfiction books of the year, and I talked about it pretty in depth in my best books of 2023 video if you want to watch that. But this essay collection starts out with a really long essay called Heart Museum, and Durga chew-bose is just exploring so many different topics in here. I think the way that I had summed it up in my best books of 2023 video was that she really focuses in on like the little things in life. She just has such an eye for detail and for these little interactions and moments that make up the human experience. One of the other really memorable essays in here, I believe, is called On Living Alone, and that really resonated with me because I read this a couple months after I moved into my own apartment for the first time. And yeah, I just had such a wonderful time reading this. I have so many underlines in this book. I had initially read it on my e-reader, and I transferred all of the highlights that I had made on there into this physical copy whenever I bought the physical copy of it. And it took so long because there was so much that I had to go through and find. So I'm curious to see if those underlinings still resonate with me. And this just really feels like a comfort read to me, so I'm excited to return to it. And then we have the books that I didn't necessarily hate the first time around, but I also didn't love them as much as I feel like I should have. and I'm curious to see if I have a different perspective on them now. I wanted to choose one from each year, from 2021, 2022, and 2023, like I did with the books that I really loved, but I only read 10 books in 2021, and I've already reread 3 of those. I plan on rereading Crying in H Mart. I think the other one that I really loved from that year was Normal People by Sally Rooney, and then the other 5 I don't have anymore because I didn't enjoy them, and I wanted to pick stuff that I still had on my shelves. So we've got a book from 2022 and then 2 books from 2023. And that first book from April of 2022 is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. This was my first Didion. I feel like it is a lot of people's first Didion. I feel like it's very highly praised, and I initially tried to read this in tandem with the audio and a physical copy of the book, and that didn't work out for me, so I ended up just reading it physically. And I enjoyed the writing, but it didn't strike me as hard as I was expecting it to, or maybe even wanting it to. This is Joan Didion's memoir about the loss of her husband and the grief that she faced in the year after that. So it was very like heartbreaking, but I just feel like I wasn't in a place in my like reading journey where I was ready for it, which makes sense because I was still pretty early on in like getting back into reading whenever I read this. And I've read some other of Joan Didion's books since I've read this, one of them being Blue Nights, which is her memoir about the loss of her daughter. And that was a 5-star read for me. I really loved that one. So I feel like I'm going to have a better experience with this one this time around. And then I'd also like to reread Drifts by Kate Zambreno. I initially read this in May of 2023. And this is kind of like an auto-fictional novel going through the life of a writer. And I remember there being a lot of talk about other books and other authors in here. And it felt like something that I should have loved the first time around, but I just didn't connect with this one whenever I read it for the first time. I don't know if it was just kind of like a wrong book, wrong time kind of situation or what, but I just didn't really feel super into this one. So I want to give it another shot. Also, love this cover. Yeah, this is the only Kate Zambreno that I've read, and I would be curious to read some of her other books. So if you guys have any recommendations on ones that I might like a little bit more than this one, I'm also open to that. Well, the final book that I would like to reread is Second Place by Rachel Cusk. I also read this in May of 2023, and I also just had a really like lukewarm experience with this one. If you haven't seen my Rachel Cusk video, I talk all about my experience with almost all of her books, and kind of my like recommended order in which you should read them. And this is one of her more recent novels, which I historically have enjoyed her earlier work more, but I would like to give this another shot. After going through kind of the challenge of reading Parade, her newest book, it just gave me a new appreciation for what she's doing in her more recent books, and I feel like I could maybe get more out of this now than I did last year. This is about a woman that invites an artist to stay in her guest house. She really loves this artist's work, and things get kind of strange whenever he shows up. I really don't remember a ton about this book. I read it initially from the library, and one of the things that I'm also kind of like realizing is I feel like the format in which I read a book like subconsciously affects my feelings about it sometimes. I don't know what it is, but I feel like with books that I physically own a copy of, sometimes I feel like I have an easier time like getting into them and really enjoying them. I don't know what it is about like library copies not being mine, but it just kind of creates like a bit of a detachment sometimes, I think. I don't know. It's very strange, but I've noticed the same thing with e-reading sometimes as well, where sometimes I just have a bit more trouble getting like immersed into books when I read them in that format. So now that I do have my own copy of it, you know, maybe some underlining and some annotating will happen. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know if you guys feel the same way about that. We're gonna give this one a second chance and see if it maybe changes where this book sits in my cusk ranking. We're gonna use this video as like accountability for me to actually stick to rereading these books, and I really, like I said, I would like to do like little reading vlogs about these whenever I get to them, just because I think that that would be fun to document my thoughts in real time versus just like in a wrap up. Keep an eye out for those, and if I don't post them, yell at me about it. Not actually. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts on rereading. I feel like it's a really big thing for some people, and then for others, like me historically, it's just kind of like not a thing. I think my aversion to it for the most part has just been like, I have so many books that I haven't read yet that I want to get to, and I feel like I could be reading one of those instead, but it does deepen your experience and your connection to books, so I'm trying to embrace it and do more of it. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!